Good afternoon and evening, everyone, and welcome to Stamp Panels presented by the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. Today, we have Steve Johnson, John Wilson, and Gregg Redner, who will be continuing from a previous panel with us. Tonight, we will have Through the Eyes of a Philatelic Judge, Part 2. Gregg is a nationally accredited judge with the RPSC. He has exhibited at the national and international levels and has published articles in the Canadian Philatelist, the Philatelic Communicator, the Philatelic Exhibitor, the Journal of Sports Philately, Topical Times, and the American Philatelist, and probably a couple more. He is the current president of the RPSC, and he's also the president and director of a number of other organizations, philatelic organizations. As an exhibitor, Steve has earned national level gold medals, along with FIP level vermeil and gold medals, with a highlight being an large gold medal for his Yukon Airways traditional exhibit. And Steve has been an RPSC accredited national judge since 2019. Finally, we have John, who is the North Toronto Stamp Club's longtime exhibition committee co-chair and historian. He's also a past president of the NTSC, award-winning writer in philatelic journals, and his contributions to philately have been recognized by the RPSC. And if I may add, he does a really great job putting on the exhibits every year. We would like to thank our sponsor, Longley Auctions, for sponsoring Stamp Talks and Stamp Panels. Longley Auctions is a public auction firm specializing in selling Canadian postal history, large worldwide collections, stamps, postcards, and philatelic literature. So be sure to check out longleyauctions.com to get those things for your exhibits. And now we will have our land acknowledgement. If I could press the right buttons. There we go.
Society of Canada has chosen to acknowledge Indigenous peoples in Canada with the following statement. As a step towards reconciliation, the RPSC acknowledges that our national office in Toronto stands on the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Our national office is also covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. Furthermore, we acknowledge that Indigenous peoples did not give up the lands that they had been on for thousands of years that now constitute Canada. We also acknowledge that Europeans did not discover Canada or arrive on an uninhabited land. The RPSC acknowledges that Canada is covered by many treaties and modern lands, resources, and self-government agreements with Indigenous peoples, and that the provisions of many of these arrangements remain unfulfilled. The RPSC further acknowledges that many Indigenous peoples in Canada have not had their rights fully recognized and implemented according to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The RPSC pledges to promote recognition and knowledge of Indigenous peoples in Canada and elsewhere and their cultures through philately. We will also work towards building positive relationships with Indigenous peoples in Canada.
Great. Thanks, Gregg. That was great. Well, without further ado, we have Gregg again.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Lisa. And I should say for all of us, thank you to both you and Al for all you do to put this series together for us. It's always a delight, and my Monday nights are happier because I get to be here as part of it, whether I'm presenting or not. So most of you will have seen Inside the Mind of a Philatelic Judge Part 1, which we did last year in January. And as you probably no doubt remember, it's a very scary place to be, but we hope tonight won't be quite as scary. We thought we would break this into two sections. The first section, we're going to talk about what makes, in the eyes of a judge, what makes an exhibit successful. And then we also wanted to address some recent comment that has come to us about the fact that the RPSC doesn't do a lot to attract new judges. Of course, that's not true. We're always working behind the scenes to try to find judges. But we thought we would do a bit of a talk on how one becomes a judge and what it's like. So that'll be the second part of today's program. So we're going to work up the ladder in terms of experience and in terms of expertise. Obviously, Steve and John could do it at the same time, but I would still be at the bottom of the ladder. So I'm going to go first, and we'll have Steve go, and then John after. So these are just my thoughts for me personally. What makes a really good exhibit? And I would say that for me, the most important part, and I didn't put this at the top, but I'd like to say it, is passion for the subject. If you are passionate about the subject, in my personal feeling, you're 25% of the way there, because your interest will be communicated through what you mount as you improve it and as it gets better. But in terms of the technical things, I would say that for me, a cohesive, well-defined subject with a clear beginning and ending, and also logical reasoning, is particularly important. It's one thing to be able to designate the beginning and the end, but not have an exhibit that follows a logical golden binding thread through. I recently have started showing a new exhibit on Emprunté mail, and the first time I showed it, the jury was confused by what I was doing. And I wasn't confused, but they were, and they were correct about it. So it's really important that you understand logically not just what you're trying to say, but also what your audience is going to see by doing it. And one of the ways, of course, that I find particularly useful in figuring this out is to try to do this for my family. If I try to explain to my family, who has less than zero interest in philately or stamp collecting, what I'm trying to do, and I can make them understand it, then I know I'm going to be able to get the point across. I'm also particularly interested in original topics, topics that may not have been explored to death, or your approach to a topic. We probably have all seen Paul Sargent's excellent separation anxiety exhibit that he has done, which has won so many awards in the last couple of years. What's interesting about that? His topic is interesting. How do we separate how were stamps separated before they were perforated? And his approach to the topic is also very interesting because he's looking at the stamps in a new way. Number 3 for me is original research, or some research, even if it's not primary source research. And by primary source research, we mean information where, say, you went to the Canadian Archive and found some information on the stamps you were doing. Or you might also take other people's writings and distill them down into your own conclusions. That's secondary research. But I think it's really important that you have something in there to show that you have considered your topic from a scholarly level. Study, read, and deepen your knowledge. You can always tell when somebody has a deep knowledge of the subject. The more you know, the easier it becomes to decide what is important to show. I also love an exhibit that teaches me something I didn't know before. And very often, if you are presenting a topic that isn't particularly well defined and you find yourself thinking, gee, I didn't know that, chances are no one else is going to know it either, or very few people will. I'm excited when I see an exhibit that brings something new into my philatelic glossary. Clean and consistent presentation is also extremely important. If you have not had a chance to watch it, the Federation of Inter-Asian Philately did a 3 or 4 series talk on FIP exhibiting. And one of those talks is given by Chris King, who does a masterful job of explaining exactly what this means and showing you how very small things can improve your exhibit. So I don't want a cluttered presentation, and I want a presentation that is consistent across all its pages. I would like to also say everything belongs. I don't want to find myself asking, what is that doing there? Now, you might explain it to me and I might learn something, and that's great. But if you put it in there to fill space, or you put it in there because you hope that we'll understand what it's about, or better yet, that you hope we won't notice that it has nothing to do with your topic, that will hurt you. So you should ask yourself constantly, does everything belong in what I'm doing? And last of all, the reason I exhibit is to codify my thoughts, and to help me um, to understand my material better. That's really why I exhibit. It's great if I get, the gold medal, but it doesn't really matter to me. What I want to do is find a new way to look at what I have. And so I would say be inventive and be creative with what you're doing. Try very hard to look at things in a way that they haven't been looked at before. And you'll know if that's the case if you do the fourth one down, study, read, and deepen your knowledge, because you'll also know what exhibits have been done. So those are the things that make my viewing of exhibits particularly successful and enriching. So we'll go on now to Steve.
Well, I'm going to echo a lot of things that Greg had to say, but I didn't include it in mine, but being creative, it's almost like sometimes as the exhibitor, you got to figure out what your end goals are. And one of my goals for like my ABC Murders exhibit wasn't necessarily for the most points. I wanted to have it viewed as the most creative exhibit. Um, so I think everybody can make a great exhibit and should try. And just keep in mind what your goals are. Is it just to inform people? Is it to get the biggest score? But I looked at this more from a technical point of view, in that what I want to see right off the bat is a clear title that defines the scope um, of the exhibit. I should know right off the bat from the title what I expect to see and the scope of it. So I had a couple of examples there where I said, well, if you just say the Stamps of Canada, that's a title, but it doesn't really tell me what I'm going to see. The Admiral Issues of Canada is fine, but if you really want something strong in terms of a title, it's a study of something, the postal history of a certain reign or issue or something along those lines. I also like, and this is basically all to the title page, which to me is the most important page. It sets out your entire exhibit. Um, I'd like to see a well-defined purpose statement. You know, when we did essays or theses or whatever, we had a statement that we were out there to prove. What do you plan on showing? And I think that needs to be clear. And then a plan. How do you plan on organizing the exhibit? Um, you know, I think is it going to be something as simple as saying, well, this happens to be in chronological order, or for thematics is by theme or what have you. So with all of those things, I mean, a great exhibit has to have a logical treatment to it. Greg talked about the golden thread. Um, and with that, it should be also very easy to follow. So um, you need subheadings to help. Some exhibits don't have that, and it's like, well, like kind of like, where am I within this exhibit? So a good exhibit will have the golden thread, and it should be very easy to follow. So shouldn't have to go back to a previous page and go, I'm kind of lost in within the exhibit. Um, the key items should be identified. How are you going to identify them? Again, that should be on the title page. Quantified if possible, 2 of 3 known, um, etc. Um, it also doesn't get bogged down by text, and I know I can speak for myself. When I first started exhibiting, especially with airmail, is that I thought the most interesting thing would be things like who was on the plane and what the weather was like. And these are interesting tidbits of info, but don't really advance the philatelic story that you're trying to have. Um, so don't get bogged. I call it text minutia. Don't get bogged down by the added little, especially with thematics. They talk about all kinds of things that relate to the subject, but sometimes they forget to add the philatelic information to their exhibit. And you also need now a logical epilogue. Where does it, does the exhibit just drop off, or is there a logical reason why the exhibit ends where it does? Um, so you'll need to think about that. I like to have a clear and clean synopsis. If you have in your story, if there's gaps within your story, if you're doing a postal history of something, and there's a 10-year gap of maybe a postmark or town or whatever, and you don't explain it, maybe the synopsis is where you can put that info. You can quantify your rarities there too. Like, I don't have this, but I know that there's two proofs in private hands. That's why you're not going to see that within your exhibit. Anything you can do to eliminate questions a judge may have, that's where you can put it, and you can really explain why this is philatelically important. Which is, I think we talked about last time. That's something that, as a judge, I still have trouble with is trying to figure out what the philatelic importance is to subjects, and that's really where you can really hammer home why this is philatelically important. Research as well. I mean, it should be identified. How are you going to identify it? I know for myself, I tend to use bold and italics and I will say so on the title page, saying, Phil, my original research has done this. If I have research taken from other texts, I will mention it in synopsis and might highlight it as well if it's really relevant to the story. And as Gregg says, don't overlook the presentation. I mean, it's 5 points, but it's a big 5 points. I've seen exhibits where, it's a gold medal exhibit, but the presentation just looks off. And it does have a tendency for me to have that bias. Like this, well, why is the presentation it should be, put together a lot nicer than that. So presentation goes a long way, than more than just the 5 points that scored. So those are basically the things that I look for, and what to me makes a great exhibit. And those are the same things that I follow. I try to follow the score sheet and try to hammer home each one of those sections. Um, I agree with Gregg. I love to see new things. Um, I try to do them myself, and I know the challenge behind it, but that's the point. It's you should challenge yourself, and you should challenge us as the judges with material, because there's nothing more of great discussion at the frames when we have an exhibit that we haven't seen before. So I would encourage everybody to get an exhibit out there. It's a worthwhile challenge. And I leave
Okay,
it to Mr. Wilson.
thanks. And folks, I'm going to reiterate, I think, a large part of what both Steve and Gregg have said, although I organized it a little bit differently. Um, I take for granted, I guess, and I look for evidence that the exhibitor has thought and thought and thought about the subject, about the topic they have chosen. And to me, it's a kind of push me, pull you situation. You look at your material, it suggests a story. It suggests that you're missing material. You acquire the missing material. You rethink the story. You do your research, and you do much research, and you rewrite your story. We used to say that the title page was the last page to be done. I think now it is the synopsis. And there's a lot of special pleading and evidential information that goes into a synopsis. Judges want to see a synopsis. It helps us give you the best possible sympathetic and correct markings. I didn't talk specifically about research, although I value it deeply. I just think that in the treatment, we will see evidence of your research. I treated it as if I'm seeing this in the frames for the first time. I've had a look at the title page. I've looked at the synopsis. The first thing I think is Is it visually accessible? That is, can I actually understand its structure from the look of the pages? Some are so dense we cannot follow them easily. We have to check and recheck, and judges do not have a lot of time at the frames. We will go back and look carefully at anything we are first responders on, but when we try to find an initial metal level, we don't have a lot of time. So can we get access to it? Can we see how it works? Secondly, a title page that lays out the subject. We do need a title page with a clear title, and we also need a plan somewhere on that page to show how you're going to approach it. You can talk about the difficulties because it's part of your purpose. I think the challenge is set out there clearly for us. We've talked about the storyline. There has to be an understanding that this is developed, and the simplest way is chronological, but you might have, it depends on the subfield you're in, how you decide to do things. I do think it's very important to use some form of header to keep the viewer aware of where they are in the exhibit. We remember back, there was a plan. Where are we now in that plan? Do we know where we are? It is frustrating as a judge to get lost on page 28 and say, where are we exactly? And then another judge says, I think we're here. And the panel works towards figuring it out again. Then the exhibit is a little weaker than it should be. Something that I think we all need to think about are the use of ephemera. Steve mentioned how he thought people on the plane and the weather were important. Guys, we love the historical context of this material. Most people who collect stamps, and especially postal history, are historians of some sort, and we love the things that have a window on that world. But you can only give a hint of that context, the flavor. Control it. Don't let it overtake your philatelic material. Rarity has to be identified. There are different ways to consider rarity. If you are talking about the fact that it is hard to obtain, that's not necessarily rarity, but it can be a special piece for you, and you can mount it accordingly. If you do know and can find out by some form of census, state the numbers that are known, and if yours is a new one. Difficulty of acquisition and the thumping of the chest for having acquired it is best in the synopsis, I think. That is a place where you make your special pleading about how hard it has been to assemble this 20 years of searching for this material, and that's all you've been able to find. Don't put that on the exhibit itself. Tell the judges why it has been difficult. Very important point, very simple. The material you show does have to be relevant. If you do any other material, it's going to be noticed. Of course, if you can, you try to find material that has a visual interest. We all recognize a very special cover, and it doesn't have to be clean. It can be totally bashed up. And we say, wow, look at that. Or here's the largest known multiple. Amazing, amazing. How has that survived for 130 years? It's very important that you exit your topic clearly. As Steve said, and Gregg, it's an epilogue. And the final point, and I put it at the last because although it's the first thing we think of, it's our first 5 points, and the last 5 points, please be careful in how you prepare it. It's important that it looks like you care about your material. Things happen. Material gets mismounted, drops off pages because it's not held on properly. We can understand those things, but have you paid attention to it and respected your material? Try not to have things mismounted. And similarly, I'm an editor by profession. Try not to misspell things. It won't kill you, but I want to see that you care. So those are my basic points.
Super. That's great. Thanks, guys. Why don't we hold off questions till the end so that we don't shorten the second point of this. I think what's interesting is that all three of us have kind of come at the important points from different angles, and most of the important points are exactly the same. So depending on how your brain works, the message should be clear. I also wanted to talk about, as we said, about the idea of becoming a judge. The two go hand in hand. I still remember very much the day that it occurred to me that I could maybe do this. And I have to admit, I was really reticent to start because I was worried about the breadth of my knowledge. You see all of these brilliant judges, and they have something to say about pretty much everything. And you don't really stop to think about all of the study that goes into this. And that's how you become a good judge. So who makes a good apprentice? Now, an apprentice is somebody generally that goes through, as we'll see in a few minutes, 3 exhibits under the guidance of a jury and a jury chairperson. And it's a learning experience. You're not expected to come in and be brilliant right off the bat, although I know a few people who have come in who are brilliant. I would not be one of those people, but certainly there are those who join the ranks of apprentice. So who makes a good apprentice? Number 1, someone who loves philately. I mean, do you really love looking at stamps outside and postal history outside of your particular collecting area? Someone who loves to learn and study. As both Steve and John have pointed out, when you're preparing to be the first responder or be part of the jury on an exhibit, we go to great lengths to go through the synopsis, read when possible, read the bibliography that's provided, do cross-study and reference to enable us to be able to judge this intelligently. And it requires a real love of learning and studying. This was the most important one, and John Wilson was my first head judge when I was an apprentice. And I said something and I wasn't happy about it, and he said, "Oh, you must never be afraid to be wrong. It's okay." And it was a wonderful lesson for me that sometimes, we have an opinion about something or we think we know about it. There might be somebody else on the jury who knows more. Nobody is trying to make you look bad. Sometimes people just know more than you do. So you're never afraid to be wrong. Someone who doesn't mind not knowing the answer. I've been on several juries where people have said, why is this important? Or I don't really understand the point of this. Why do we need to know this? And there's generally somebody on there who is able to answer those questions. So not knowing the answer is not a threatening thing. Someone who doesn't mind asking for help, especially in the apprentice stage, I always wanted to know why people did what they did. Why did they decide what they decided? Why was my score so far off from everyone else's? So I didn't mind asking people why that was the case. And it was a great learning experience for me. And then last of all, somebody who likes to work collaboratively. Most juries in Canada and in the US, for that matter, now are conducted collaboratively with a first responder leading the way. So if you like to be part of a team and to learn from each other, it's a great experience. The process. There are 3 exhibits that are required as an apprentice. If you have some trouble on one of your apprenticeship stints, there might be a 4th one, but that's not very often that happens. I like to think about them this way. In the first apprenticeship, you're learning the ropes of what it means to be a judge. You're observing, you're listening. People will ask you for your opinion on things. You take a deep breath and offer it, and then learn that, that you might be a little high or a little bit low. Everybody's very gentle with you. The second apprenticeship, you become responsible for more exhibits and also for suggesting the scores, which is very honestly a big step. You have to kind of set the tone. And so it's you take what you've learned in number 1 and you apply it to number 2. And number 3, you're responsible for presenting the exhibits that you're the first responder on, suggesting the scores that you think are appropriate and justifying your thoughts. And my third jury was in Fredericton, and I had Charles Verge and John Wilson and Liz Heisey as my fellow jurors. And I have to tell you, it was a daunting thing to have to make a case for exhibits under those circumstances, but I survived. And then after each session, you have a chance to sit down with the head judge and talk about what you think went well and what you think you needed to work on. And that's always very collegial and friendly. So I guess I would say make sure there's absolutely nothing to be feared doing this. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be a walking encyclopedia. You have to be willing to do the work and willing to be taught. And it's within the grasp of anyone that wants to put the work in. Okay, Steve, your turn.
So mine was what is necessary when preparing to judge. So I took it as like preparing to judge for the actual show. And so the biggest thing for me is it's a balance of your time management in that you know, as ex Canpex exhibit chair, I always think about the jury because typically you don't get all the title pages and synopsises until about 30 days out from the show. And that's not a lot of time to give a jury, or for myself, time to go through each title page and synopsis. And so I like to create a work schedule. How many exhibits are in the show? How many days out do I have? Because the last thing I want to do is scramble. Personally, I don't work well when I'm not prepared. And so I have to have a work schedule where I like, okay, I have 40 days out, I have 30 exhibits. I want to at least do a title page and a synopsis a day. And so what does that mean for me? It's like, so I will get in no order, just the order they come in. I'll read the title page first. And I'll go basically to what I was saying in the first section there. Does the title make sense to me? Does the scope well defined? Is there a plan? Is there a thing? And I'll make notes on all of the pages saying whether or not there's question marks or check marks as to what's there. Is there an epilogue that's mentioned on the title page? And then I'll go through the synopsis and I'll read through the synopsis and go, okay, this question's been answered. So I have a really good idea as to what each exhibit is going to bring forward. And that way I can type out my notes and have it behind each title page and synopsis. So when I go judge, I can refer back to the questions that I had and to the title page and all my notes and go, okay, these questions have been answered that I originally had. So for me, time management, I mean, I can't, I have to be well prepared. And I think it's also fair to the exhibitor. I don't want to be scrambling on the show floor going, this exhibit. Yeah, no, I want to be right there. So when I can look at my colleagues and go, okay, I think this is what this exhibit's about. Here's the storyline. There's all those points that we talked about before. The second thing after all of that is I want to reread the APS manual of judging. It's a good refresher anyway before every show. There's going to be subclasses in there that I've never maybe have judged before or not as familiar with or as strong with. So I want to reread and make sure that I'm well versed within each category, if you will. What's to be expected if I was to see a revenue exhibit? What's there to see? What do I need to check up on if I'm doing a postcard exhibit? Um, all of those things, Cinderellas. I mean, what is in there, and especially now with social philately and whatnot. So you got to really brush up on those key points for each class, and I will add those to my notes for each exhibit. And then I got to tell myself I got to be in a positive frame of mind. I tell myself, it's a hobby. It's a hobby. It's a hobby after all, and that, as Gregg says, you're not going to know everything and you can't expect to know everything. And, I don't want to personally, I put that pressure on myself not to fail in front of my colleagues, but it's like this is supposed to be a collaborative effort. It's supposed to be a fun effort for everybody involved. I want to be challenged. I want to learn. I want to have fun. And so I tell all the exhibitors, it's just like, this is supposed to be a fun part of the hobby. This is something that a subject that you have deep care about that you want to bring forward, and we want to share that as together as well. And then again, I want to challenge myself. So part of being a judge for the show is that you get to pick the exhibits that you want to be the first, quote unquote, first responder to. And generally speaking, you want to pick 6 or 7, maybe 8 as an alternate and let the jury chair say, you know what, Johnson? Yeah, it's a little bit too easy. I want you to suffer with the subject or this title, and I'm fine with that. I always tell the jury chairs like whatever, whoever doesn't want something, I'll take it because I want to be challenged. The last thing I want is to do 6 airmail exhibits. I'll do them. I'd be happy to do them, but I'd like to do things that are outside my comfort zone. For example, I did the in Edmonton last year. I did the Boxer Rebellion. I didn't know a thing about it. I mean, I'm from Windsor, Ontario. The only boxer I knew was Tommy the Hitman Hearns. I mean, so it was great to research. It was great to see the pieces. I made a list of things I expected to see that they were there. And so it was a daunting task, but that's the fun part of a judge and why you should be a judge is you get to expand your horizons. You get to see things and material that you may not ever have thought of collecting, but you get to see these rarities and this in all the great subjects that are out there as a judge. And so I think it's just it's a great experience for anybody to want to do it. But those are really the 4 main things that I think about. And then you do the research. You try to find the background info, whether it's Dr. Google or you have a book on the subject, or even better, you know the subject inside and out, and you get to go, okay, let's see what they know, and be challenged that way. Um, so yeah, that's all I have really as for preparing for a show. And just remember, it's fun. It's supposed to be fun.
Thanks, Steve. John, I just put a nifty picture of you on the slide here. I wonder if you would share your thoughts, maybe from the perspective of a head judge, on as one possible thing to speak about is what makes a good apprentice, what makes a good person learning to do the craft, and then anything else you want to share.
Well, as you can tell, I'm not wonderful with paperwork, so I'm not the best head judge around because I completely forgot you were going to need notes on this. Actually, with us tonight, I noticed in the comment section we have experienced head judges. A call out to Tom. Tom Fortunato, I think, is with us tonight, and he's an experienced man in this field. First point I might make is your head judge, by the way, is probably just as good as the show chairman. Because Al, are you noticing this, please? Because he nudges us, and the head judge nudges the judges. Say, come on, guys, we've got a schedule. By the way, Gregg, you did fabulously in your first apprenticeship with me, just so you know. Again,
Thank you.
he was exactly what I hope for in a judge, an apprentice or a fully fledged judge, intelligent and with a wide variety of interests. Those are the very first things that I look for. I think the most important thing is a person willing to judge, wanting to try it, has to have interest and be willing to work in a variety of fields outside the comfort zone. As Steve says, you have to say, okay, I'm not great about topicals. I'll do my best. And I observe carefully judges with more experience than myself and how they have done fields I'm not comfortable with. Of course, they have done the manual sideways and backwards, and that's my second point. Judges have to be prepared. The head judge will assign first responses and will obviously invite the participating judges, including the apprentice, are there exhibits that they would enjoy being first responders to, and having assessed all of those things, assigns the responsibility to be this very important role in the judging process, to be the first responder to the exhibit. The second quality for an apprentice judge is the willingness to do the work. You have to research and review and develop an expectation of an exhibit. From what we have been shown as a title page, and sometimes title pages are mysterious. Sometimes we have only the title and not the subtitle to work with until 2 weeks before the show. I don't think exhibitors should worry about revising title pages to the last second. We often get people changing the title page 2 days before the show. We probably have already done our research. We're not too worried if that little twist comes at the end. The judges, apprentice judges, and full-time experienced judges read and reread the APS judging manual. It is renovated from time to time. We have new developments. We're talking about importance and how we're going to handle importance. It evolves. Once we actually have assigned the work, we get to the show, then there's another set of expectations that I think the head judge would have of the panel, that, as was mentioned, that we have to do our discussions at the frames with each other. We have to be collegial. Now, I think, Gregg, you mentioned that people didn't put too much pressure on you in the first apprenticeship. That was not my experience. We were split into 3 panels. This was an Aurapex, I believe, split into 3 two-person panels, and I was asked to give the first response for every exhibit with the mark. And I'm not kidding. It was death-defying. And I was paired up with Fitzroy of Calgary, and he was really kind to me because the first couple of exhibits, he said, well, I don't know, it kind of looks like a silver to me. And I go, oh, good, lifeline. It's like marking on an IELTS test. I think it's a 6.5 because I can be at 1 mark out and it's okay. You really have trouble getting the levels right when you're just starting out. And then you pretty quickly figure out, okay, this is not unreasonable, or I am really mixing up treatment with something else. And the classic line for a judge is, don't double ding the exhibitor. If we've taken points off in one place for a fault, we don't take them off twice. And that's very important for the apprentice judge to figure out, and for us all to correct each other, because we all have that tendency. So we have to work with collegiality. Each judge is independent, but if we are working in a group at the frames, the first responder will lead that discussion, and we will come up with our marks and say, we're pretty close on that one, or we're going to have to talk about this. We're wildly out. There is a problem with treatment if we have 2 marks which are way up and down, and we have to work those things out. And just as we will also review, in most cases, if we have the time, the marks we gave exhibits early in the show and the marks we are giving as we are tired and closing in on the end of it, because we say, why have we given all those people 87s and those people 78s? Let's make sure we're being consistent here. Let's check. If we have time, and time is the enemy of judges. We don't have very much of it. So we're trying to be working well. I would like to say there's one other thing as a head judge, there's administrivia. There is secretaryship on the panel. Somebody's got to be keeping the records and checking the chief to make sure the records are accurate. This is particularly important in a show where there are lots of special awards, and there are shows that have a lot of specials, and we have to make sure is this qualified or not qualified? And a good show chairman helps us by building lists and saying, we think these are the novices. We think these are these qualify for airmail or Elizabethan philately or whatever the category might be. That's a huge advantage because we don't have much time. Awarding specials is very stressful. Finally, there is paperwork, and a judge has to be responsible for getting the paperwork completed so that the chief judge can review it, confirm it against the schedule of marks, and sign off on it. This is the final responsibility of head judges, and not fun. Final responsibility, however, for any judge is not behind the scenes. It's out in front. It's either in the critique room, if you're doing it that way, or at the frames. And there are a number of things that have to be done there. The most important thing about anybody who wants to take on judging in the modern world is you have to have sensitivity and helpfulness and encourage exhibitors to come back and do it again. We have to respect the amount of labor that has gone into making an exhibit. It is not a light matter. People do not toss together 16 pages. They agonize, and we have to respect that effort and reward it with our praise for the work that's been done. We guide what isn't clear. We encourage people to take another crack at it if it didn't get the level they wanted. So your ideal judging candidate is helpful in the feedback session. I think it's important for exhibitors to realize that at feedback sessions, which are by level medal, and many shows still do this, the judges will make a general comment and will allow you a question, possibly two, but they will not do a back and forth, back and forth. That is something you do with the judge at the frame. Most exhibitors are quite prepared to talk with a judge at the frame. Many will seek not only the first responder, but other judges, and we make ourselves available for this. The exhibitor who has to think about whether they want to do it again, the work in remounting is a killer, right? An 80-page exhibit remounting is a massive undertaking. Or maybe you finally got the missing piece at an auction that you really want to have in frame 3. You've got to rebuild things. So the ideal judge is one who prepares, knows and reads the manual, comes with a fairly good idea of what that field should be able to show, is willing to work with colleagues, doesn't get snippy with exhibitors, but helps them, and prepares paperwork. And I think that's it, guys.
Terrific. All right, well, I'll stop sharing, and I see we have a couple of questions. So, Lisa, maybe do you want to lead people through those, or do you want me to do it?
I think you're doing a great job over there, and that you would perhaps be able to direct the questions to the best person.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to do it. So Lee Hogg has asked in the question and answer section, showing classic postal history, the synopsis is my biggest holdup / fear. Can we just dissect the synopsis for completeness? So either one of you gents want to jump in on that?
Steve, you're Mr. Synopsis.
Well, I look at it from a personal point of view as I take the score sheet that you would get and I would apply it to the synopsis. So, what are you trying to show? What's the purpose of this exhibit? What's your highlights? What's the philatelic importance? I think that's a big one, especially for postal history, because you can take some obscure, of Snake Island, and why is that philatelic important as opposed to the postal history of Great Britain in 1840? I mean, so I would say that it's your opportunity to tell us, why are you showing this? Why is it important? Here's some key research that I have done. This is how long I've been collecting this area. Here's some of the key pieces. But again, for me, it's like, what question, like why, if you have things that are missing, like so I don't have a proof of such and such a stamp, but I know that there's 2 in private hands. That's where you put in your synopsis, because then it eliminates the question a jury will have. Well, I suppose that there should be some pre-production out there. Well, actually, no, there isn't. The exhibitor knows enough that it's out there, but she can't acquire that at present. And you're going to have some reference material in there for us to study up on your subject. If someone wants to get a contact with me about a synopsis, I can feel free to send some of mine as examples. But those are kind of for me, the key elements that you want to put into a synopsis. It shouldn't be viewed as daunting. It's your opportunity to brag a little bit about the exhibit, things that you can't put in the exhibit. itself. It's your opportunity to bring forward a lot of those other things that gives us insight as to what you're showing.
I heard somebody describe it one time as cliff notes for philately. It gives you an excellent outline. It explains to you why it's important and what's going on, and anything that might be kind of outstanding in the way the exhibit is put together. John, do you want to say anything about that, or?
Well, it is very important. Steve's right, of course. You have your special pleading there, but you also make it clear why you don't have what you don't have, that you know something's missing. That is quite important to us because people who are going to look at the exhibit go, okay, I've got the bib. I'm looking at the reference, what I know about in this field. Sometimes it's very hard to find information. Sometimes it's out there and only in study circle journals or whatever. We do our best to find it, but you say, okay, this is not done well, hasn't been done for 30 years. The best material is closely held. This is the best I can do. And we'll give you all the credit we can for that through the synopsis. What is the scope, the purpose, and the challenge?
Yeah, excellent. That also, you mentioned study circle journals and dealing with literature. Lee also asked the question, how do you deal with the language that you're not familiar with in an exhibit, French, Spanish, whatever it is? And I would say even more importantly, when you give the judges in your synopsis bibliography, which is in Latvian or, Irtuk or something along those lines, that there's probably no way that the average judge is going to be able to decipher that. So two different things, but I think they're related. So,
but
I judged.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, I judged. I typically do the North Toronto online show, and they used to get some exhibits from I don't know if it was Ukrainian or Russian, but it was always in that language. And there was a literature entry one year on, I believe it was on shipmail. The I didn't need to know the language. The material told the story. You could tell
right.
that they were going from the earliest ships that were delivering mail to modern. So I didn't need to know the language. If the material, it's like even ones in French. It's the material that will do it. So I yet to have a problem with exhibits in a foreign language because you're really judging the material
Mhm.
in that sense. So, and Google Translate does help on your phone nowadays. So there is that as well.
And you can find, if you know in advance that you are going to be dealing with the language, you can put yourself in touch with somebody. We have better networks than we used to for this.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. Yeah, Lee Hogg also says, Cyrillic, dot, dot, dot. I have to be honest with you, Lee.
Osmanly.
I have to be honest. There's a wonderful program which costs you $14.95 a month to have, which is called DeepL, which is used by professional translators when they run into text and things that they're not able necessarily to command. And I find that program incredibly helpful. And I have only once or twice in all of my time given DeepL a picture of a text and not have it give me pretty accurate things in response. So it's a little bit different today, You have to have a sense of it. And as Steve says, it's important to also look at the material and make sure that your translation applies to it. But I don't think it's as big a deal as it once was. A question from Jerry about exhibiting at the local, regional, and national level, what the differences are. I would start by saying John and I did the Woodstock show last year, and I will tell you, we judged that show no differently than we would have, a national level show. You just have to be slightly more understanding, and also in some cases slightly more forgiving of the fact that things might be a little bit more on the road to completion or being developed a little bit more as you go along. But I don't really think there's much difference in the way we judge those. Do you guys?
Well, I was at that same show, and I agree with you, of course. We, I think there is a higher expectation that the best exhibits will be at a higher best.
Right.
Steve and I have often exchanged comments on how discouraging it would be if all you got was a certificate of participation. When you've busted your butt to get the thing up, it doesn't help. The best are the best, and they show it. They are the ones most likely to be moving up to the next level.
Right.
And I think up to the national level, we say you are marked and valued on what you show. Once you get to that top international level, you tend to be marked on somebody else has what you should have. It's missing.
Right.
And it's a much tougher audience that way. That's my thought on this.
Agreed. Steve, anything you want to add?
I'm a bit more of a softie when it comes to the local, regional level. I have a personal point of view that every exhibit should at least get a silver because I don't see the point of going further down than that. Those are national level medals if it's a silver, bronze, or bronze. Um, I've always viewed the local regional level where I would use a score sheet as the strength, where I would try to write as many things, suggestions, things that they should change, things that I liked, all of to me, it's the comments. And it's not even if you're a novice exhibitor or just a regional exhibitor. I get national level exhibits at local shows.
Right.
So I put my national cap on and go, okay, if you're bringing this out to the national level, I suggest you change this. You might score it a little bit harder at the national level or the local level because they should maybe know better. But no, I don't. I try to bring as many comments to the pages as possible. And as John says, the best will rise to the best, but it's the feedback. You want those folks at those shows, whether it's when I was in Southwestern Ontario, you had a number of great local regional shows, and you want them to keep coming back, and you want them to go to the next level. The fear factor shouldn't be there for them. We as the judges should be guiding those folks, saying, hey, "This is a great subject. You just need to do this, this, and this, and you're going to do just fine." So
Yeah.
it's the comments for me and the feedback at the frames or at the feedback session that's the most important.
Yeah, and I think the worry always is that we'll judge at the local level with national eyes, and I think that it's true that you try to be as exacting, but you also try as hard as possible to understand that these are a bit more relaxed, as John says, or perhaps not as complete as they might be. I've never judged at a regional show where I felt the judges were being arrogant and saying, "Well, this isn't as good as it should be." I'm sure it happens, but not at the ones I've been to.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you for a
Yep.
moment and dismiss John so that he can go to his other appointment and
Thanks.
not feel
Thanks,
bad
John.
about it.
Thanks,
Go,
guys.
John,
Great
go.
to stay with
Thanks for
you.
joining
Thank you.
us.
Thanks,
Okay.
John.
I know.
Hi, John.
Bye-bye, guys.
And perhaps if Steve and Greg don't have other commitments, perhaps they can
Sure.
like to
I still,
continue.
I still have voice. So.
Okay.
I did want to say two things. It has been pointed out that if you're interested in the subject of the synopsis, Andrew McFarlane wrote a mind-bogglingly thorough book on this topic, and just look up Andrew McFarlane. It's available on Amazon, and he also did a talk for the RPSC on his book. So if you look on the RPSC YouTube channel, he goes into great detail about the synopsis there. So hopefully that'll be useful. And I also posted under my comment, you'll see a YouTube link there. That is Chris King's FIAP talk on presentation. So if you're looking for that, you can find it. Let's see what other questions we have here. Can you please discuss how you approach importance My understanding is subject importance relates to how big a slice of the philatelic pie, relates to how big a slice of the philatelic pie, and philatelic exhibit importance with how well the exhibit treats the subject within the stated scope and how it compares to other exhibits on the same subject. And that comes from Gene Wang.
Well, it's always a subject I have the most difficulty with as a
Yeah.
judge. I don't think I'm alone in saying that. You're
Yeah.
right. There's a new, I think it just came out where there's now the scoring for importance is 5 points for the subject importance and 5 points for the philatelic importance. And like anything else, it's a very subjective point of view. And I would almost say that it's on the onus of the exhibitor to tell us why they think it's worth 10 points. Um, there are going to be some absolutes. And, when you have a penny black exhibit, it's hard to not say that's worth 5 points from a philatelic point of view and probably from a subject point of view for each. And then it kind of goes down from there. I think if you're doing a subject that no one else has ever done before, I think that's from a philatelic point of view and maybe a subject point of view, worth more. Um, but it is something that I personally do have a struggle with, and which is why it's great to have the other judges there collaborate and saying, okay, this is a subject of, let's say, U.S. number one. Well, that's pretty important. That's pretty probably up there with the penny black. Why isn't that considered to be a 5 out of 5 as well? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I
Mhm.
don't know. But you have to have those discussions with other judges. But it's really up to you in the synopsis to hammer home why you feel that your subject is important and why it's philatelically important. And especially for thematics and for topicals and for anything else, it's probably fairly straightforward for the traditional and postal history point of views. But for all the other subclasses, it's a big, I think, a bigger challenge to get that across.
Mhm.
I don't know how you feel about that, Greg.
No, I couldn't agree more. It also for me ties in to the way you present your information and the research that you've done to find something new in what you're speaking about. I beat up all the time in Belgian exhibiting the fact that how many more exhibits can we see about the medallions and the epaulets, the first two issues of Belgium? How many more of those can we see? Is it important? Yes, it is important, but it's also been hashed to the point that there's nothing really new to say about it, unless you're Paul Sargent and you're going to look at how the stamps are separated or something like that. So I also tie importance into the ability to say something new and not merely rehash what everyone else has said. Okay, Gilles Morel asks if there's a max age to become or apply to become an apprentice judge. Joel Wiener is not here, but I think I can safely say that is not the case. You're welcome to apply at any time that you would like to, and I know that the corpus of judges would love to have you. So this is probably a good question to end on because this does irk some people. Is it appropriate that a judge must make a positive comment to an exhibitor? I mean, we do feel that we're always trying to find something positive to say. I guess the question is, is it really appropriate? And I was in a meeting one day with Ed Croft, where things got a little bit testy. And Ed said out of nowhere, and I was surprised, he said, "Hey, folks, calm down. This is a hobby. It's supposed to be fun." And I think, if you've got an exhibitor who's put the time into mounting an exhibit, researching it, getting the material, and taking the time to bring it to us to show it, I think it is incumbent upon us as judges to find something in that exhibit, no matter how weak or in the process of development it is, to find something positive in there to say, because our real role is to encourage people, not to discourage them.
I agree. Um, it when you do a feedback session, um, you always try to be what do you like about the exhibit? You start off that way.
Yeah.
What did you like about this? You know, I it's almost like going back to school where you have to you put something up and then you have it graded in front of the entire class. Nobody likes to start off with, well, you know what? Um, you want to be positive. Well, my approach has always been is that if I don't understand something and it affects their score, I ask them a question. It's not that you're not positive, but you can frame it in a positive way. It's like, I look at frame this and I'm not too sure what you meant by that. It's not a positive. It's how you frame the question to the exhibitor. You don't belittle them. You don't put them down. You want them to feel good about their exhibit, and I want to show my enthusiasm is that I hope you take the advice and I hope you take a look at it so the next time around I don't see the same mistakes, which I do sometimes see. Naughty, naughty on you exhibitors out there. But Ed's right. And I've said along. I try to find fun in this. If it's not fun, I'm out. It's like, life's life's hard enough. This is a hobby. You know,
That's
you
right.
know, get the exhibits out there, become a judge, be part of it. We're not going to bite anybody's head off. This is supposed to be fun. You know.
Lisa, can I ask you a favor? Because Joel Wiener is actually here, and he wondered if he could add some comments on the RPSC Authorized Observer Program. Could you promote him and just let him spend 2 minutes talking to us about this, or 3 or 4, since
Yeah,
he is
actually,
the definitive voice on this?
I had him muted, but if we promote him, we can see his face also.
Turn my camera on just a second. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to bring
Ask if he was
people's
decent.
attention to a program that's. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really underutilized, and that's the Authorized Observer Program. And this is to allow people who are thinking about becoming a judge to basically follow a jury through their entire deliberations from beginning to end to see what's involved. They can't have an exhibit in the show, obviously, but they really see what's involved. And we've only had 1 or 2 people actually do it. And it's really an opportunity if you're thinking about becoming an apprentice, but you really don't want to make that step, because we've had people who do one apprenticeship and then say, this is not for me, and we don't hear from them again. But if you're thinking about it, you can join a jury as an authorized observer. There are rules and regulations there. It's written up, which I could provide. I actually asked Mike Walsh to try and do an article on this, because it came in a recent issue of Canadian Stamp News. What is RPSC doing to encourage new judges? And this is a program we instituted to encourage new judges and really can get people involved in it. So it can take place at a regional show, it can take place at a national show. But if people are interested, just contact me, and we can set that up. We have several national shows coming up, in March in Edmonton, in May in Ottawa, in June in Kitchener. So there is ample opportunity if someone's interested to follow a jury. They really have to keep their mouth shut, unfortunately, unless they're asked by the chief judge to comment, in order to not disturb the judge's work. But if anybody has any questions on that, you can contact me and I can tell you more about it.
That's great, Joel. Thank you so much. All right. Well, Lisa, I think we'll call it there. I hope this has been useful to people, and we're all available to answer any questions. If you want to find out what a recent apprentice judge went through off the record, just send me an email, and I'll be happy to talk to you. I will say that There are no two people that I enjoy being on a jury more than I enjoy being on a jury with Steve and with John. I have the greatest respect for these two men and their knowledge and their approach to the way that that they do the craft of judging. So, anyway, thanks, Lisa. We'll turn it back over to you.
Actually, this time belongs to Al.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Joel. And Lisa. We certainly appreciate all of your comments. And of course, the more you know, the easier it is to show. So that was, I think, one of John's comment this evening. And I would like to thank you all for your presentations this evening and your participation. Before we close, we would like to acknowledge the lands that we're on. Thank you again to Longley Auctions. Visit longleyauctions.com and maybe you can find some treasures for that exhibit that you're working on right now. Thank you very much for joining us. Please join us next time for Stamp Talks, where Douglas Hill will be presenting Canadian Illustrated Permits. Thank you very much, and so long for now.